Okay, action.
Wall Street was my ability to get back to a domestic agenda. I just won the Oscar for Platoon, and I was a big believer in cursing yourself by not working. A lot of directors get the Oscar, they don't go back to work for a while because they know it's going to be just impossible. They're the same set of circumstances again, you know, it's just a lucky break. But I wanted to get over it, you know, I didn't want to get hung up in that thing that happens, inertia. So I just plunged right in. Next month, I was planning the film. I wanted to go back to my roots in New York after Vietnam and see what it was like and explore the new Wall Street, which I noticed during I was writing Scarface in the early 80s in Miami. There was so much coke around and so many lunatics. And guys from New York, these kids, like for the first time I'd ever seen, millionaires to me were in their 60s, you know, older men were rich. Here were these kids running around with 25, 28, 35, with millions of dollars, with these, you know, playing the market all over the world around the clock. It was just like a new world. My father would have been shocked at the electronics that allowed that to happen. Here was one of my first films about America. And I have to find out about America, so I had to dig in by going there first, because that was my roots. You know, in a way, if you really think about it, that was my home, because Dad was on Wall Street. And I remember those offices and those buildings.
No, he's not here right now. That's what you told us to say. Give me that phone.
And I remember my dad's integrity. He really stood for another world that you don't see today. But it seemed to me that there was more dignity and more class, more integrity. The concept of principles applied, although there were crooks all the time. I'm not saying that all the crooks happened in the 80s. They certainly were crooks. But there was a sort of a standard of values.
Stick to the fundamentals. That's how IBM and Hilton were built. Good things sometimes take time.
Business films hadn't been done since Executive Suite, Robert Wise. My father had often criticized the movies as not having done realistic businessmen. So as best I could, I did an homage to Dad and his world, as well as the new world that was coming up. The stock market now is everywhere. Some kid wearing grunge clothes, being a stockbroker in Long Island, it doesn't matter, you know. Everything's broken down.
Okay, let's go to work.
They're off and running.
Oliver's timing on Wall Street was impeccable in terms of when the picture was made. 89, 90 was the end of that whole kind of movement. Bottom fell out for a while there.
Yeah, dump him for Christ's sake. Let's go. 30,000, 3/8 top.
It was based on that phenomenon of white-collar crime that was emerging in greater numbers in the mid-'80s. I did not foresee the crash, as some people say, because if I had, I would have made a lot of money. But no, that was insane. Somebody said that I made the film to exploit the crash, and that person doesn't even realize it takes a year and a half to make the film, so how would I know there was going to be a crash in October '87 and our film is coming out in December '87? They let us shoot on the New York Stock Exchange during working hours. I asked them to stage a very hectic scene because it was a volatile stock. And those guys were really hams, but, you know, those salesmen, it was great. And we got to see the SEC. We went around New York. Ken Lipper, the ex-deputy mayor, helped us enormously, as did many advisors. I always thought of Wall Street as like an extension of my Scarface script.
You win a few, you lose a few, but you keep on fighting.
And if you need a friend, get a dog.
Stanley Weiser and I were writing about some very colorful characters, of which Gordon Gekko was the chief criminal. And he was fun, you know. It was written in a spirit of fun and craziness. Because I do think that when you look back, you know, like I try to do reality, but I want to heighten it up for people like Hitchcock did and make it exciting. It's not like I really do believe you have to cut the boring bits out. Now, what's boring? You know, you can argue back and forth. You know, French filmmakers will say something, action is boring. Or Russian filmmakers will say life is boring. You know, everybody has different definitions of boring, but in this country, we do practice a form of gladiatorial cruelty, I think. You know, it's pretty quick.
Start buying Anacon's deal across the board. Use the offshore accounts. And keep it quiet.
Because the movie was relatively sophisticated in terms of the nuances of business, that you really needed an old-fashioned villain. You know, you needed really twirling up the corners, a really clear, strong villain, take no prisoners, unmerciful kind of guy to create the kind of drama. You needed some archetypal characters. Otherwise, I think the sophistication of the piece and the subtleties would be boring.
You tell those spineless assholes we'll self-insure if they don't write. I can't believe it. You fire half the management and nothing changes.
One of Oliver's great strengths is his ability at casting. He has a great eye. He has given actors, many actors, the best parts in their careers.
Michael was not known as a heavyweight A-list dramatic actor at that point. He was more of a TV actor, a good, charming leading man, but, you know, a producer, too, of China Syndrome and all that, and Cuckoo's Nest. But I knew Michael from my personal meetings with him, really very impressed with his financial acumen. Very smart man.
My career up until then, I'd been doing sensitive young men roles and, you know, and even Fatal Attraction just before that was, you know, guys that are manipulated by a woman. So to have that kind of opportunity, and it sort of set the tone for me, you know, good and bad in the future part of my career after Wall Street. That was an ultimate role in terms of being a bad guy and being nasty.
You know, sometimes I miss you, Gordon. You're really twisted.
So I got it down pretty good.
This is Kirk Douglas's son. I mean, I can see there's anger in Michael. You don't see it. He's so smooth. And he also had that smirk, which is great. You can't buy that smirk. You know, an actor has to look the part. He looked like Pat Riley, and who looked like Gordon Gekko, which is what we wanted.
Bonjour, monsieur buddy.
Bonjour, mother buddy.
Speaks French already.
I was scared. It was definitely what you call an adult role. Tremendous amount of dialogue and speeches.
Did you cover that Blue Star buy? Put a couple $100,000 on those Bow Wow stocks you mentioned. Pick the dog with the least fleas.
There was no reluctance. You've got to remember, I was honored.
So, take care of my friend. Have a good lunch, buddy.
Oliver and I talked a lot about a Long Island background on this guy who'd worked his way up, you know, hard and mercilessly, right on up through the ranks and built on that. It was a toughness that did not exist in the sort of Ivy League group.
Very nice club, Mr. Gekko.
Yeah. Not bad for a city college boy. Bought my way in, now all these Ivy League schmucks are sucking my kneecaps.
Steve, Charlie's got to go to his trailer for a few minutes.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Right back.
And the film was unspecified. The title wasn't given. He said something as vague as we're going from this jungle to a concrete jungle. It's going to be based on a young trader who's seduced by the promise of quick gains. Not dissimilar from Platoon, the tug of war between good and evil. I thought, great. And I still didn't really have an idea that Oliver was a genius. You know, this, of course, was revealed later on, you know, because he is. If you look at his films, it's they change the way you feel about the subject, and in certain ways the way you feel about yourself in relation to these subjects, you know. And I think anytime a filmmaker can do that, can make it so personal, he's on a different level, and then that's where Oliver's at.
Charlie was the main guy, and Charlie anchors the movie in a very stolid performance. There is a sort of adolescent awe in his eyes, like in Platoon. There's sort of like this stiffness. I like stiff. I mean, sometimes stiff is good. Charlie fit my purposes because of his kind of stiffness, which you have when you're an adolescent or a younger man looking up to older men. It's kind of intimidating, you know. He's a nobody from Queens.
Buddy, when are you going to realize it's the big game hunters who bag the elephants, not guys like us? Gordon Gekko, please? Oh, Gekko. Gekko's beautiful.
The guy's original name, by the way, was Joe Fox. But there was a Joe Fox on Wall Street, and he wouldn't give us permission. So I said, Oliver, I said, what about Bud? And Oliver said, Bud Fox. Sounds like butt fox. And I said, well, in your mind, perhaps, but I think it's kind of a good name. And so he went with it. And then it became Buddy Boy and all this, you know.
I empathize with Charlie because most movies that I always did, I was in every single scene. People forget Charlie was like in every single scene in this movie. You know, he really was I think the voice for Oliver for a long time.
He's very busy today, of course he's busy, and so am I. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking.
I love the whole relationship between this kid who came in and tried to pitch me on a stock, and then in my mentoring process, by the end, sells his own father out. It was a device, you know, literary writing device, but it was quite successful in sharing a large